It started like any other morning, quiet, calm, and a little strange. The air felt heavy, and the sky had this soft gray color that didn't belong to any season. People noticed it, but no one took it seriously. Some thought it was pollution. Others said it was just bad weather. But deep down, a few people felt something was off. Something big was coming. In the middle of the city, a scientist named Dr. Lena Corbett stood on the rooftop of her office building watching the sky. She wasn't a soldier or a hero, just someone who studied the weather. But what she saw that morning made her heart beat slow and her mind go blank. She had been tracking strange energy signals for days, waves that pulsed through the atmosphere like the heartbeat of the planet. She didn't understand where they came from. At first, she thought it was some hidden weapon test, but now, looking at the sky, she realized it was something else, something that wasn't from Earth. Then it happened. At exactly 9:13 a.m., the clouds split open. A light, bright white and silent, spread across the horizon. People on the streets stopped. Drivers hit their brakes. Airplanes flying above went off course. For a few seconds, everyone just stood there, staring up. The light wasn't like the sun. It didn't burn. It shimmered as if it was alive. Then shapes began to form inside it. Dark, sharp outlines like floating rocks or massive ships. No one could believe what they were seeing. Social media exploded. News stations went crazy. Some people thought it was a global prank, others said it was a secret government project. But when one of those shapes moved and the sound reached the ground, no one laughed anymore. The air itself shook, and windows cracked under the pressure. Birds scattered. Alarms went off. And from that moment, life on Earth would never be the same. Dr. Corbett ran inside and checked her instruments. Every reading went wild. Temperature dropped, then spiked. The Earth's magnetic field began to fluctuate like a flickering candle. Even the clouds started swirling unnaturally, moving in patterns that made no sense. It was as if the planet itself was reacting. Her assistant shouted, "It's not the weather, it's responding to them." Lena didn't answer. She was staring at the data, her mind racing. For the first time she felt fear, not for herself but for the world. Something inside her whispered that Earth knew it was under attack. It wasn't just human panic this time, it was planetary. Around the world, chaos spread faster than the news. Governments scrambled to make contact, but the alien ships didn't respond. They just hovered silent and patient like predators waiting to strike. Some nations fired warning shots. Others tried to communicate with lights or signals. None of it worked. The visitors didn't come to talk. Then the first strike came. It happened in the Pacific. Satellites caught it before humans could even react. A beam of light shot from one of the ships straight into the ocean. For a moment it looked beautiful, a thin line glowing deep into the blue. Then the sea boiled. The shockwave spread in all directions, swallowing ships, islands, and coastlines in seconds. The ocean itself screamed, roaring into massive waves that tore through everything. Millions watched the live feed until the signal cut off. Then silence. The world went cold. Lena watched the footage replay on a small screen in her lab. Her hands trembled. She wasn't a military expert, but she understood what she was seeing. The aliens weren't attacking people. They were attacking the planet's resources. They were extracting something from deep inside the Earth. Over the next few hours, similar attacks hit other places. Mountain ranges, deserts, forests, even the polar ice. It was like they knew exactly where to hit. They weren't here to destroy. They were here to take, to feed, and with each strike, the planet seemed to react even more violently. Earthquakes started happening everywhere, not just in fault zones. Storms formed out of nowhere, twisting and colliding like they had minds of their own. The sky changed color, red near the poles, green over the oceans, deep violet above the cities. It was beautiful, terrifying, and unnatural. People began saying that the planet was angry, that it was alive, that it was fighting back. In one of her last calm moments, Lena recorded a message for the Global Weather Institute. She said, "Something inside the Earth is reacting. It's not random. The tremors, the temperature spikes, the magnetic shifts, they're all connected. It's like the planet is aware of the threat." No one wanted to believe her, but deep down everyone felt it. The ground moved differently. The wind carried a strange vibration. Even animals began to act strange. Birds flew inland. Whales beached themselves in massive numbers, and dogs howled at the sky for no reason. It was as if every living thing knew what humans refused to admit. Earth was waking up. In cities, fear turned into panic. People ran to shelters, packed their cars, tried to flee anywhere that felt safer. But where could they go? The threat wasn't one place, it was everywhere. The entire planet was under attack. Electricity flickered, satellites went dark, and communication broke down one by one. Within a day, humanity was cut off, alone under a foreign sky. In the silence that followed, something unexpected happened. The weather began to change in strange, precise ways. Storms formed over the regions where the alien ships hovered, not randomly, but directly above them. Lightning became constant, thick, and unnaturally bright, as if the clouds were charging themselves. Earthquakes struck the ground under alien structures, not under cities. Lena's sensors recorded these changes. She whispered to herself, "It's fighting back," and she was right. Every second, the planet's response grew stronger. The atmosphere thickened, making it harder for the invaders to move. The oceans turned violent, swallowing their machines whole. The land split, hiding energy sources deep under molten rock. It wasn't fast, but it was deliberate. Nature itself was choosing sides. In small communities, people began to feel a strange mix of fear and hope. For the first time, humanity realized that maybe, just maybe, they weren't alone, not in the way they had imagined. The Earth wasn't just a home. It was something alive, powerful, and protective. The invaders thought they were attacking a weak, divided species. But they had no idea that behind those fragile humans stood an entire living planet ready to defend its own. As night fell, the ships in the sky began to dim, as if they were struggling against something invisible. A low humming spread across the air, shaking windows and rattling bones. People covered their ears, but it wasn't just sound, it was vibration, deep and ancient. Lena realized it came from the ground. The Earth was humming, communicating, and the frequency was rising. In a small town nearby, people gathered outside, staring at the glowing clouds. One of them whispered, "Maybe we're not the ones fighting." "Maybe she is," no one replied. The wind shifted, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of ozone and soil. Far away, one of the alien ships broke apart in silence, falling into the ocean like a dying star. The crowd gasped. For the first time since the invasion began, humans saw the enemy fall and the ocean swallowed it whole. Dr. Corbett looked at her screen, her eyes wide. "It's not random," she said softly. "It's intelligent. Earth knows." That night, while the world trembled between fear and wonder, she wrote one final note in her research journal before the power went out. They came for the planet's energy. But they didn't realize the planet is the energy, and it's waking up. The Earth had been silent for billions of years, letting life grow, rise, and fall in peace. But when it was attacked, when something dared to harm its children and drain its life, it responded the only way it could, slowly, powerfully, and without mercy. And as the night stretched over a world half on fire and half underwater, a truth began to spread among the survivors, something that gave them a fragile kind of hope. They whispered it in the dark, passing it like a secret prayer. You attacked the wrong species. The days that followed the first attack were nothing like anyone had ever imagined. The sky no longer looked blue. It carried a strange silver glow, like it was covered in dust that never settled. The air tasted like metal. Even breathing felt heavy. The world was quiet in the strangest way. No traffic, no airplanes, no chatter. Just the soft hum of fear hanging everywhere. The alien ships stayed in the sky. They didn't move much, but everyone could feel their presence. Their shadows stretched over cities, oceans, and mountains. They were so big that even sunlight couldn't pass through completely. Sometimes they flashed with strange lights, like lightning trapped inside glass. Scientists tried to study them, but communication systems had collapsed. Everyone worked in isolation, guessing, hoping, and mostly fearing. Down on the ground, life was falling apart. Electricity came and went. Water systems broke. People waited for answers that never came. Some groups tried to fight back using rockets or missiles, but nothing touched the ships. Every attack disappeared into a blue shield that shimmered like water. It was hopeless. But while humans struggled, something strange was happening deep beneath their feet. Seismologists noticed unusual vibrations under the crust of the Earth. It wasn't the kind of movement that caused earthquakes. It was something rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. It came from multiple locations all over the world, as if the planet itself was sending a signal. In one of the last surviving weather labs, Dr. Corbett stayed awake night after night, staring at the readings from her instruments. They made no sense. The data showed massive energy building up deep underground. Not nuclear, not magnetic, something older, something alive. She tried explaining it in one of her last transmissions before the network went down completely. It's like the planet is preparing, she said. Not collapsing, preparing. Then one morning everything changed again. It began in silence, as always. Birds suddenly disappeared from the sky. The ocean waves stopped moving for a few seconds. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, without warning, the clouds twisted into spirals, and the air cracked with the sound of thunder that didn't end. Across the horizon, bright lines of light began shooting upward from the ground, thin beams of blue and green energy that reached straight into the clouds. At first, people thought the aliens were attacking again. But the beams weren't coming from the ships, they were coming from the Earth. The energy shot up from mountain ranges, deserts, and even the seafloor. The alien crafts wobbled in the sky, like something invisible was pushing against them. The Earth had started fighting back. The oceans grew restless, moving in strange circular patterns. Waves rose and fell, forming shapes that looked almost deliberate, like hands pushing the ships away. Storms formed with perfect precision, each one circling near an alien position. Lightning bolts fell non-stop, thick and bright enough to light entire cities. People watched from rooftops and underground shelters, their eyes wide in disbelief. One man whispered, "It's like the planet knows where they are." Every hour brought something new. Volcanoes that had been quiet for centuries erupted all at once. Ash clouds climbed higher than ever before, blocking out the alien lights. Even the ground began to move, stretching and twisting like something underneath was alive and shifting its weight. The invaders had dug too deep, and now the Earth was awake. The scientists who were still alive struggled to make sense of it. They couldn't send messages, so they wrote down everything they could by hand. They noticed patterns. Each alien energy drill was followed by a massive natural response. The Earth wasn't just reacting randomly. It was targeting them. Far from the cities, survivors hid in caves and tunnels. They could hear the deep rumbling from below, a low vibration that shook their bones. Children covered their ears, frightened, while the elders stared at the trembling walls with wonder. "It's her," one of them said softly. "The planet spirit. She's not going to let them win." As the alien ships tried to stabilize, something strange began happening to their energy cores. Their lights flickered. Their shields weakened. A few smaller crafts fell from the sky, crashing into forests and oceans with no explosions, just quiet impacts like they'd lost all power. People didn't cheer. They were too stunned. It was the first real sign that the invaders could be hurt, but it wasn't by human hands. Meanwhile, the world itself was transforming. Rivers changed direction. Storms formed patterns that looked unnatural, almost mathematical. Ice from the poles began to move south, forming massive floating structures in the sea. Scientists would later call it Gaia's pulse, a wave of natural defense that adapted faster than any weapon humans had ever built. In a mountain region where one of the alien drills was active, the ground split open with a roar. Lava poured out like liquid fire, surrounding the machine in a circle. The alien metal hissed and melted as if the Earth itself was swallowing it whole. From space, it looked like glowing veins wrapping around the alien machines, cutting them off one by one. Dr. Corbett, still alive and moving from one ruined lab to another, watched from a ridge far above the burning valley. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The planet wasn't dying, it was fighting. Every system she'd ever studied, the weather, the tectonics, the oceans, they were all moving together, connected by something no one had ever understood before. "This isn't chaos," she whispered into her recorder. "It's coordination." As she spoke, another tremor shook the ground, but this time it wasn't destructive. It was rhythmic, 3 long rumbles, then silence, then 3 more. It almost sounded like a message. She wrote in her notebook, "The Earth is communicating with itself. We're just listening to the conversation." Over the next few days, the pattern became clear. Every time the aliens struck the ground for more energy, the planet responded with equal force. Earthquakes, lightning storms, tidal waves. But none of them seemed random. They hit exactly where the invaders were strongest, as if the planet could sense their presence beneath the crust. People began to believe again. Not in governments, not in weapons, but in the world they lived on. Some prayed, Others just stood outside during the storms, feeling the rain on their faces. They whispered words of thanks to the sky, to the ground, to the oceans. Fear was still there, but it had changed into something deeper, a connection. In one city, a group of survivors gathered on a rooftop to watch as a massive alien tower began to crumble under a dark storm. The wind howled, lightning struck, and within minutes the structure disappeared into the sea. One of the survivors, a woman clutching her child, smiled through tears and said, "It's like she's protecting us." And maybe she was. As days turned into nights, and nights into more endless days, the war between the invaders and the Earth grew louder. The aliens seemed desperate now. They tried to escape back into the sky, but the air itself resisted. Their engines sputtered. Storms followed them wherever they went. The more they tried to take, the harder the planet pushed back. In the middle of all this, Lena made one last discovery. Deep within the seismic data, she noticed something strange. The Earth's energy wasn't just random bursts. It was growing in strength. The frequency of the tremors was changing, becoming more organized, like a living thing adapting in real time. She realized that the planet wasn't just fighting for defense, it was evolving to counter the threat. It was learning. The thought made her heart race. If Earth could learn, if it could respond with intention, then maybe humanity had a chance. Not because of their weapons, but because of their connection to the planet itself. Maybe they were part of the same system all along. That night, she wrote in her last note before her recorder died. "We thought we were defending Earth, but it was never ours to defend. It's defending itself and us." Outside her shelter, the world shook again. But this time, it didn't feel like destruction. It felt like power, like a heartbeat, like the planet itself was alive and awake after a long sleep. And in that heartbeat, a message was clear, not in words, not in sound, but in the feeling that moved through the ground, the air, and the sea. The invaders had come to drain the planet, to strip it of its life. But they had made a mistake no species should ever make. They had attacked a living world. They had attacked the wrong species. The world had changed completely. The air didn't smell the same, the ground didn't feel the same, and even the light looked different. The sky had taken on strange colors, gold in the mornings, violet at night, and a pale green glow that sometimes appeared without warning. Nobody knew what was real anymore. It felt like the planet was alive in a way humans had never felt before. Days blended together. The alien ship still floated above, but many had lost their shine. Some hung motionless like broken machines. Others kept shifting positions as if searching for safety. The once powerful invaders now looked uncertain, almost afraid. It was clear that something deep beneath the surface was changing, something that had been silent for too long. The tremors that once shook cities were now steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. It came and went in waves, spreading through mountains, oceans, and deserts. People started calling it the pulse. At first, it scared everyone. But slowly they began to understand. It wasn't meant to destroy. It was a sign of life. Dr. Corbett, who had been hiding in an old observatory high in the hills, listened carefully to the pulse every day. Her instruments were half broken, but she still managed to collect data using scraps of metal, batteries, and old recorders. The signals were unlike anything she'd seen. It was as if the Earth's core was alive and communicating, not just through tremors, but through magnetic waves, ocean currents, and even the wind. One night, as she sat alone near the window, she noticed that the stars seemed dimmer. A faint green glow spread across the horizon, reflecting on the clouds. She turned on her radio, trying to catch any broadcast. All she heard was static, and then a deep, low sound like a slow drumbeat. Her heart skipped. It wasn't random noise. It was the same rhythm as the pulse. She whispered to herself, "It's reaching out." In other parts of the world, survivors were seeing strange natural events. Forests that had been burned started regrowing at incredible speed. Rivers that had dried up began flowing again, but their waters now shimmered faintly at night as if carrying energy. Even deserts started showing signs of life, plants sprouting through the sand, glowing faintly under the moonlight. The planet wasn't just defending itself anymore, it was healing. And with that healing came something else. The aliens who had once drilled deep into the crust to steal energy were now facing a force they couldn't understand. Every attempt to dig or extract was met with violent resistance from nature itself. Machines melted from the heat, Ships cracked under pressure and their signals grew weaker each day. Their bright metallic skin began to corrode as if the air had turned against them. Humans who watched from hiding noticed it first. One of them said quietly, "The planet's fighting smarter now." He was right. It wasn't just storms and earthquakes anymore. It was strategy. The Earth was reacting like an intelligent being, striking at the right places at the right time. Hurricanes appeared only near the alien refineries. Lightning hit the same points repeatedly, disabling their machinery. Even animals began to move in strange patterns, almost coordinated, as if they were following silent commands. In a valley once filled with alien machines, thousands of birds gathered and flew together in perfect circles above the invaders' structures. A few moments later, a massive windstorm formed exactly where they circled. The wind tore through the machines like blades, and within minutes the valley was empty. The birds didn't scatter. They flew away in silence, disappearing into the clouds. Dr. Corbett watched reports like these from scattered radios that survivors had managed to reconnect. "It's organized," she murmured. "The planet isn't reacting randomly anymore. It's learning." She began to write everything down. Every storm, every pulse, every vibration had meaning. And as the pattern grew clearer, she realized something shocking. The planet wasn't just defending itself. It was communicating with every living thing. In small villages where technology had failed completely, people began to sense things before they happened. They could feel when an earthquake was coming or when the wind was about to change. Some said the Earth was whispering to them in ways they couldn't explain. They didn't need machines, they just felt it in their bones. Farmers who stayed behind said that when they touched the soil, it felt warm and alive, like it was breathing. The animals moved differently, calmer, more aware. Even the ocean's waves started moving in smoother rhythms, almost peaceful when no invader was near. But when the aliens tried again, when they sent new energy beams into the sea, the planet answered instantly. The waves grew monstrous, higher than buildings, swallowing their machines whole. The sea turned dark, and when it calmed, there was nothing left. No debris, no light, no sound. It was as if the ocean had erased them completely. From her observatory, Lena looked at her notes. Every natural system, air, water, fire, soil, had started working together. It wasn't chaos. It was purpose. For the first time in human history, nature wasn't separate from itself. It was unified like one giant living organism. She whispered, "It's awake now." But with awakening came a price. The balance of the planet was shifting. The energy that Earth was releasing was enormous, enough to shake continents. Weather patterns were unstable and some regions were changing forever. Huge cracks appeared across old highways. Forests moved like waves and coastlines were swallowed by the rising seas. Humanity was caught in between, protected but also tested. Still, even through the destruction, there was beauty. Skies glowed with colors no one had ever seen. The nights shimmered with soft blue lights dancing in the air. The ground itself hummed with quiet power. It was frightening, but also strangely comforting. People realized that they weren't alone anymore. The planet they had lived on for thousands of years had finally revealed itself as something more than just rock and water. It was a guardian. Deep underground, where no human had ever gone, something was stirring. Tremors showed that vast networks of molten energy were moving like blood through veins. It wasn't random. It followed patterns that matched the pulse. Some scientists believed it was the Earth's core reacting consciously, channeling energy to defend the surface. Others simply called it the awakening. In one of her recordings, Lena said they thought Earth was silent. But silence isn't weakness, it's patience. Meanwhile, the invaders tried one final move. They gathered their remaining ships and formed a huge structure in the upper atmosphere, glowing bright enough to light half the planet. Their goal was clear. They wanted to drain the remaining energy before leaving. It was desperate, and it was their biggest mistake. The pulse grew stronger. The ground shook everywhere, but not in fear, in warning. Volcanoes erupted in sync. Lightning formed massive webs across the sky, and a sound like a roar echoed through every continent. It wasn't from the ships. It was from below. The planet was speaking in the only voice it had: power. Every creature, every tree, every drop of water seemed to respond. The wind howled, the rain poured, and the earth moved as one. The alien structure flickered, then cracked, its light scattering across the sky like shattered glass. People watched from hills and rooftops as the invaders' last hope dissolved into nothing. When the light faded, the world went dark for a few minutes. Total silence. No sound, no wind, no movement. It felt like the planet was taking a breath. Then, slowly, the pulse returned, soft, steady, and peaceful. Dr. Corbett stood outside the observatory, looking at the horizon. The sky was finally clear. The alien ships were gone, vanished into the void. She couldn't see them anymore, but she knew the battle wasn't just about survival. It was about balance. The Earth had defended itself, but it had also shown humanity something they had forgotten. They weren't separate from the world. They were part of it. Every tree they cut, every ocean they poisoned, every piece of land they destroyed. It had all been felt by the same living being that had just saved them. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered to the wind. "You were awake all along, weren't you?" The wind moved gently through the trees, almost as if it answered her. That night she wrote her final words in the notebook she had carried since the beginning. The attackers came for Earth's life, but they didn't realize they were trying to steal from something alive. They dug too deep and they woke the oldest power in existence. The planet is not a rock we stand on. It is a being that carries us, and now it remembers who it is. The Earth was silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This time it was the calm after a storm, the breath of a planet that had fought for its own survival. Somewhere deep underground, the pulse continued. Steady, alive, eternal. The Earth had awakened, and it wasn't going back to sleep. The days after the aliens disappeared were filled with silence. Not peace, just silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm when everything is broken, and you can finally hear your own breathing again. The world didn't look like it used to. Cities were cracked, forests were half-burned, and the oceans had changed their shape. But even through all the damage, there was something different in the air. It felt alive. The sky had stopped glowing strange colors. The silver dust that once floated over everything had settled, leaving a clearer blue. People came out of hiding slowly, carefully, as if afraid the ground might move again. They walked on shattered streets, looked at the empty horizon, and tried to believe it was over. But deep inside, everyone knew it wasn't really the end. Something powerful was still moving under their feet. The planet was awake now, and it wasn't the same Earth they had always known. Dr. Corbett had survived in the observatory for weeks. Her equipment was damaged, but some of it still worked. Every night she sat by the old console, listening to the faint rumble that came from the ground, the pulse. It was softer now, slower, almost peaceful. It reminded her of breathing. Sometimes when she closed her eyes, she could feel the rhythm in her chest matching her heartbeat. It was as if the Earth and the people on it were finally in sync. But not everything was calm. In different parts of the world, strange things were happening again. This time not from destruction, but from transformation. Forests were growing back faster than anyone thought possible. Trees that had been turned to ash now stood tall and green, their leaves glowing faintly at night. Rivers were purer, their waters running with a strange energy that shimmered under the moonlight. Even the soil was changing, richer, warmer, almost breathing on its own. It was as if the planet was rebuilding itself, stronger than before, but with that rebirth came something new. Something that frightened and fascinated people at the same time. Nature had started to move on its own terms. Storms no longer formed randomly. They gathered in precise regions, over empty alien ruins around the edges of deep craters near the scars left on the land. These storms were focused, deliberate, and almost intelligent. They didn't harm humans anymore. They only struck the places where the invaders had left their mark. One survivor said in a radio broadcast, "It's like the Earth remembers where it was hurt," and it truly did. Across the oceans, survivors on ships saw whirlpools form exactly above alien wreckage, pulling the metal remains deep into the sea. In the mountains, small tremors opened cracks and swallowed machines that had been left behind. The planet wasn't just cleaning itself, it was erasing everything that didn't belong to it. Dr. Corbett studied these patterns and realized something that sent chills through her body. Every natural reaction, every wave, every storm, every flash of lightning was perfectly timed. It wasn't random nature. It was intelligent correction. The Earth was healing itself as if it were a living body removing infection. But there was more. Animals had started behaving differently. Birds flew in huge coordinated groups, not out of fear, but purpose. They formed shapes in the sky that almost looked like signals. Wolves, elephants, and even sea creatures moved in patterns, as if responding to some invisible command. People began noticing that the natural world was acting as one mind. The planet wasn't only fighting anymore, it was communicating. Lena, sitting in her observatory, began hearing faint sounds through her radio again. But they weren't human voices. It was the same rhythmic pulse she had recorded before, only now it had layers. Low and high tones like a melody. She listened carefully for hours, her eyes wide, heart racing. "The earth is singing," she whispered. The world outside her window had turned into something both beautiful and strange. The wind had patterns. The clouds moved like gentle waves. Even the nights had changed. Stars looked brighter, and sometimes faint green lights danced across the sky like living auroras. The planet was alive in ways no one had ever seen before. And then came the whispers, rumors spreading from one survivor camp to another. Some people claimed to have heard voices in the wind, soft and distant, almost human. Others said they could sense things before they happened, like when rain was coming or where food would grow. It was as if humanity had gained a small connection to the living earth. No one knew how, but people were adapting too. Farmers noticed their crops growing faster than ever, even in damaged soil. Fishermen said the sea had become calmer near the shores, and those who treated the land with respect seemed to be protected in mysterious ways. But not everyone learned that lesson. There were still small groups who tried to dig up the alien metal left behind, hoping to sell it or use it. They said it was advanced technology, something that could make them rich or powerful again. But every time they tried, the earth responded. A sudden storm, a landslide, a quake, always just enough to warn them off. No one got hurt, but everyone understood the message. The planet was drawing lines now. Some places were no longer meant for human hands. Dr. Corbett wrote in her notes, "It's not anger. It's balance. Earth is teaching us boundaries." Meanwhile, the remaining alien ships that had managed to survive in orbit tried one last time to reconnect. They sent beams of light toward the surface, scanning for energy sources. But something invisible blocked their signals. The Earth's magnetic field had shifted, growing stronger, surrounding the planet like armor. The aliens couldn't break through. They hovered for days, helpless, and then one by one they drifted away into the darkness of space. For the first time in history, the humans who survived felt something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not the kind that comes from governments or weapons, but from the ground beneath their feet. In a small camp near what used to be a city, a group of survivors built a fire and watched the stars. One of them said, "We always thought we were protecting Earth. Turns out she was protecting us." No one replied. They just sat there quietly, listening to the faint hum that came from the ground, feeling the warmth that wasn't from the fire but from the soil itself. Dr. Corbett, miles away, looked out from the hill where her observatory stood. Below her, the land was slowly turning green again. Streams were forming where there had been none. Life was returning, and not just in plants. The energy felt different, cleaner, stronger. She opened her journal and wrote slowly, "Earth doesn't just forgive. She rebuilds," but she also knew something else. This wasn't over in the way people thought. The world had changed too much. The balance between nature and humanity was no longer the same. The planet had shown its strength, and now it was setting new rules. Humanity could live here, but only if they learned to live with it, not over it. The pulse grew softer with time, like a heartbeat that had calmed after a long struggle. But it never stopped completely. It was a reminder, a living rhythm that said the planet was still awake, still aware. Lena smiled faintly, closing her notebook. The wind brushed through her hair, carrying a warm scent of new grass. Somewhere far away, thunder rolled gently, not in anger, but like a whisper from the earth itself. And for the first time in her life, she felt no fear. Humanity had witnessed something no one could have imagined: the planet's true power. The invaders had come thinking Earth was just another world to take from. They had attacked what they thought was a simple species. But they were wrong. The humans were never alone. Every mountain, every tree, every wave, every breath of wind, it all belonged to something greater. The Earth had always been alive. It had always watched, waited, and nurtured. But when the danger came, it did more than survive, it fought back. And now it had made its message clear. This world was not a place to conquer, but a living being to respect. As night fell, the stars shimmered more brightly than ever before. The pulse hummed softly beneath the ground, steady and strong, like the breath of something eternal, and somewhere in the distance, the earth whispered to its children in a voice that only hearts could hear, "You attacked the wrong species." The earth was calm again, but it wasn't the same calm as before. It was a different kind of peace, quiet, deep, and full of meaning. The planet had survived, but it had also changed. Everything was different now. The air, the light, even the sound of the wind. It carried a sense of strength, as if the world was breathing slowly after a long, painful battle. The sky looked clearer than anyone remembered. Clouds moved gently, painting soft patterns above the broken cities. The oceans were calmer too, their surface smooth and glowing under the sunlight. There was no sign of the alien ships anymore. They had left, driven away by the one force they could never defeat, Earth itself. People began to come out from shelters, from mountains, from caves. They were thin, tired, and scared, but they were alive. Everywhere they looked, they saw reminders of what had happened. Ruined, scorched ground, twisted metal, but also new life pushing through the cracks, green leaves sprouting from ash, flowers blooming where fire had fallen. The planet was rebuilding itself, and it was inviting humanity to do the same. Dr. Corbett stood on a hill overlooking what was once a city. Now it was quiet, no noise, no machines, no lights, just the sound of the wind moving through the tall grass. She closed her eyes and listened. Beneath the silence, she could still hear it, the slow, steady heartbeat of the earth. The pulse. It wasn't as strong as before, but it was still there, soft and alive. A reminder that the world was awake now, watching, remembering. Over the next few months, the survivors began to gather and rebuild. They had no governments, no power grids, no technology left to depend on. Everything had been wiped clean. But maybe that was what humanity needed, a fresh start. People began to live closer to the land again. They grew food by hand, used rivers for power, and learned to read the weather by watching the skies. And something strange happened. Life felt easier, not because it was simple, but because it was connected. People could feel when rain was coming. They knew when the earth was restless. They worked with the planet, not against it. It was as if, through all the pain, humanity had finally learned to listen. Sometimes, late at night, people said they could still hear soft sounds under the ground, a deep hum that came and went. Children called it the Earth Song. Elders said it was a gift, a reminder that the planet was alive and watching over them. Dr. Corbett traveled from one community to another, helping people understand the new patterns of the world. She didn't call herself a scientist anymore. She didn't talk about data or theories. She just shared what she had learned, that the planet wasn't a machine and humans weren't its masters. They were its children, and children must learn to live in harmony with their home. Everywhere she went, people listened. Some cried, others smiled. Everyone understood her message. They had all seen the same thing, the wrath of a living planet, and the mercy that followed it. In one small village built near a river, she watched as people planted trees in a wide circle, leaving space in the middle for a stone marker. On it, they carved words that would be remembered for generations. We belong to the earth, not the other way around. As time passed, the world continued to heal. The air grew fresher, the land greener, the water clearer. The few remaining traces of alien metal rusted away, swallowed by moss and soil. It was as if the earth refused to keep any reminder of what had hurt it. Only the people remembered, and even they began to see the invasion as a lesson, not a curse. The years went on. Humanity changed. Cities were no longer built to conquer nature, but to live inside it. Homes were made from stone, wood, and sunlight. Power came from the wind, the tides, and the warmth of the earth itself. People began to understand balance. They took only what they needed, and they gave back whenever they could. Children grew up hearing stories of the time the sky burned and the oceans roared. But their parents didn't tell those stories with fear. They told them with awe, because those stories were not about destruction anymore. They were about awakening. Dr. Corbett, now older, often sat near rivers or fields writing in her old journal. She had filled thousands of pages over the years, notes, memories, lessons. Her handwriting had become shaky, but her words were clear. She wrote not for scientists, but for everyone who would come after. She wrote, "Earth gave us everything." And when we nearly lost it, she reminded us that we were part of her, not above her. The aliens didn't just attack our planet. They woke it up, and through that, they woke us too. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, she sat outside her small cabin. The air was still warm, and the sky glowed orange and pink. Birds sang from the trees, and in the distance she could hear the faint sound of waves crashing. The world was peaceful again in its own wild and living way. She looked at the horizon and smiled. "We survived," she whispered softly. "Not because we were strong, but because she chose to keep us." The wind moved through the trees, brushing her hair gently. It felt like an answer. In the years that followed, her writings became part of what people called the Earth Records. Every village had copies, handwritten and passed down like treasure. They weren't laws or rules, they were reminders. Reminders of what happens when humanity forgets where it came from, and what power truly lies beneath their feet. Some nights when the world was quiet, people would still gather around fires and tell the story of the invasion. The elders would start softly. They came from the sky thinking we were weak, for they didn't know this planet has a soul. The children would listen wide-eyed as the story continued, how storms fought for them, how oceans roared and mountains moved, and how in the end the earth itself stood up to protect its people. Every time, the story ended the same way, with the same line that everyone now knew by heart. You attacked the wrong species. It became more than just a sentence. It became a truth that lived in the hearts of everyone who heard it. The story spread across generations. Long after Dr. Corbett was gone, her words remained, carved into stones, whispered in prayers, taught in schools. Humanity never forgot again. They learned to speak gently to the land, to treat water like gold, to walk carefully among trees. Every harvest, every rainfall, every sunrise felt like a gift, and deep below the surface the pulse still lived. It wasn't loud anymore, just a faint vibration that moved through the world like a steady breath. The people didn't fear it. They smiled when they felt it, knowing it was the earth reminding them, "I'm still here." Many centuries later, when new generations looked up at the sky, they sometimes saw bright lights far beyond the stars, maybe other worlds, maybe the same invaders watching from a distance. But this time Earth wasn't silent. It glowed brighter than before, its energy alive, untouchable, because this time everyone knew the truth. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a living being, a protector, a mother, a force of balance. And humanity wasn't just a species living on it. They were part of its story, part of its pulse. And if anyone ever tried again, anyone from the stars, from the darkness, or from greed within, there would be no doubt what would happen. The same strength that rose once would rise again. The same power that defended life would return. Because the earth remembers, and the earth never forgets who tried to harm her children. In the quiet hum of the soil, in the rhythm of the waves, in the whisper of the wind, the message lives on. You attacked the wrong species, and somewhere, deep beneath the crust in the glowing heart of the planet, that pulse continued to beat, steady, alive, eternal. Not just the sound of the earth, but the heartbeat of everything that calls it home. The sun rose slowly over a quiet world. The air was fresh, carrying the smell of wet earth and blooming plants. The light touched the mountains first, then the valleys, and finally the small villages that now dotted the land. It was peaceful, so peaceful that it was hard to believe this was the same planet that had once screamed under fire and destruction. The war was over, but the story wasn't finished. Humanity had survived, yes, but now it had to prove that it deserved this second chance. The people who remained were different from those before the invasion. Their eyes were gentler, their voices softer. They didn't talk about power or wealth anymore. Instead, they spoke about balance, kindness, and understanding. The earth had shown them how fragile everything could be, and how powerful nature truly was when it decided to fight back. The world had become quiet, not empty, but calm. The sounds that filled it now were of life. Rivers running, birds singing, trees moving with the wind. People learned to listen to those sounds again. They had stopped building machines that drowned them out. In the heart of what was once a great city, people had started to gather again. But they didn't rebuild the skyscrapers. Instead, they planted gardens among the ruins. They grew fruit trees, herbs, and flowers between the broken stones. Children ran freely, playing near fountains made from old metal parts now covered in moss. The past wasn't erased, it was blended with the new beginning. Dr. Corbett still lived, though older now. Her hair had turned gray, and her face carried the lines of years spent watching the world change. But her eyes still had that same fire, that same endless curiosity that had guided her from the start. Every morning she walked to a small hill near her home. From there she could see far across the land, fields stretching into the distance, rivers glowing under sunlight, forests alive with movement. It was a view that always filled her with gratitude. She still kept her old journal with her, the same one she had carried through the darkest days. Its pages were filled with notes, drawings, and thoughts about the Earth's pulse, the strange rhythm that had changed everything. Even now she could feel it faintly when she placed her hand on the ground. It was slower, softer, but it was still there, steady like a heartbeat. Sometimes she wondered if the planet still remembered what had happened. The answer always came in small ways. The way the wind rose suddenly when she spoke of the past, or how the ground trembled gently when storms gathered far away. It was as if the earth listened and responded in its own quiet language. People often came to her for advice. They called her the listener because she had learned how to understand the planet's moods. When the skies turned red before a storm, she knew what it meant. When the animals moved to higher ground, she warned the nearby villages, but she never took credit for it. She always said, "It's not me listening to the earth, it's the earth teaching us to listen." Over time, new traditions formed. Every year, people gathered in open fields for what they called the Day of Balance. It wasn't a festival of noise and color like before. It was quiet, meaningful, and beautiful. People sat in circles, told stories, and thanked the land for its gifts. They didn't pray for more. They thanked for enough. Children learned early that the earth was alive, not just a rock floating in space. Teachers showed them how every plant, every drop of water, every gust of wind was part of a bigger living system, and deep inside everyone carried the memory of what had happened when that system had been hurt. One evening, Dr. Corbett sat with a group of young students. They asked her to tell them the story of the invasion again, the one their grandparents had lived through. She smiled softly and began. "They came from the stars," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "They thought Earth was weak. They thought they could take whatever they wanted, but they didn't understand what they were touching." The children listened, eyes wide, their faces glowing in the firelight. She continued, "When they attacked, they woke something powerful. The mountains moved, the oceans roared, and the sky itself turned against them, not because of anger, but because of balance. The planet fought to protect life, and in the end, the invaders realized they had made a terrible mistake." One of the children asked, "Did the earth talk to you?" Dr. Corbett smiled. "Not with words. But when the storms calmed, when the fires stopped, I heard something like a heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, I understood everything. The earth doesn't speak like us, but she feels." And she remembered who was hers. The children were silent. Some looked scared, others amazed. One boy finally whispered, "So, the earth loves us?" She nodded slowly.
"Yes, but love isn't blind."
"Love protects and it teaches. That's why she woke up, to remind us who we are." After the children left, she sat quietly by the dying fire. The stars shone brightly above her. For a moment she thought she saw something move among them, a faint light drifting slowly far away. Maybe it was just her imagination, or maybe it was one of the alien ships still watching from the distance, too afraid to return. Either way, she didn't feel fear. She felt peace. Because this time everyone on Earth understood. They weren't separate from the planet. They were part of it. And that unity was the greatest protection of all. In the following years, humanity continued to grow, not through technology or power, but through understanding. People learned to work with the cycles of nature. They built homes that breathed with the wind, gathered water from the mist, and drew warmth from the sun. Cities became gardens. Roads became paths lined with trees. Even art and music changed. People began creating songs inspired by the earth's rhythm, the slow pulse that echoed through the ground. Musicians said they could feel it under their feet when they played. Painters said they saw it in colors they couldn't describe. It was as if the entire planet was creating art through its people. And through it all, Dr. Corbett's words remained at the center of this new world. They were carved into stone monuments, written in books, and spoken at every gathering. You attacked the wrong species. But now those words had a new meaning. They were no longer about anger or revenge. They were about awakening. They meant that life, in all its forms, was stronger and wiser than anyone had ever believed. They meant that no one, not even something from the stars, could destroy what truly belongs to the Earth. As the years turned into decades, Dr. Corbett grew older. One evening she sat again on her favorite hill, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The sky was painted gold, purple, and soft pink. She could hear the faint hum of the earth beneath her, steady, peaceful, alive. She smiled faintly and whispered, "You kept your promise." A gentle breeze moved around her, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh grass. It felt like an answer, a quiet, loving one. When she finally closed her eyes, she wasn't afraid. She had lived long enough to see humanity change, to see the planet heal. The earth had forgiven, and the people had learned. It was all she had ever wanted. Years later, children would still visit that same hill. They would place flowers there and touch the ground softly. Some said that if you stood quietly, you could still feel a faint heartbeat beneath the soil, the earth's heartbeat. Rhythm that never stopped. A reminder that this world is not just a place we live on. It's a living being that lives with us, and somewhere, deep beneath the mountains and oceans, that pulse continues. Slow, calm, eternal. The message is still there. Not written in books, not spoken in words, but alive in the wind, in the rivers, in every heart that beats upon this land. You attacked the wrong species. The story ends not with war or destruction, but with understanding. Because in the end, it wasn't about who was stronger, it was about who belonged, and humanity finally understood. They were never the rulers of this world. They were part of its soul, and that truth would live forever.